As you know, and Roma, first of all, congratulations on being elected or proposed by Canadian government for this position. I mean, this is amazing. Roman is an amazing person, but besides that, very amazing financial person. And as you heard, he is very high in the ranks of CIBC. He mentioned to me about a week ago, 2 weeks ago, that his boss became now the new CEO of CIBC. Say, well, next time we do it, whenever the new CEO retires, next time we do the fire chill, Roman is going to be the next CEO of CIBC.
He's younger than me, so.
Thank you, Roman, for agreeing to do that. And if we could perhaps start with description of what is Business Advisory Council, because a lot of us, I mean, I've read a little bit about it, and we talked a little bit about it because I had to learn a little bit about it, but majority don't really know what it is. It's fairly new. It was just established in June of last year, I understand. So maybe you can explain to us about Business Advisory Council and also about the Ukraine donor platform that they work jointly together.
Okay, Dubczak, and very nice to see all of you. And let me begin by congratulating you on a very successful year, Zanku. With the Chamber's done a great job, and the momentum is very strong, so you have a lot to be proud of.
Thank you.
Just to describe the role, I know a lot of you have discussed it with me, etc., and I'm quite pleased to have the opportunity to actually describe it in detail, so what it was asked to do versus what the perception of things are. When the full-scale invasion took place 3 years ago now, funds started to flow from the West to Ukraine for the rebuilding. The rebuilding was too early. It was the defense of Ukraine at the time, and the reconstruction as is. And so these funds were coming from the G7 countries and others. So it's G7 plus 5 other countries, Norway, Sweden, etc., and which is now grown. So a group was formed by these G7 countries. At the time, it's called the Multi-Donor Coordination Platform. It's now morphed to be called the Ukraine Donor Platform, for simplicity's sake. And so this was the coordinating group to decide where all the money goes. Please, if I'm wrong in all this, but this is the way it's been described to me. And so, there's a group of, they're basically the deputy minister level of all these countries that are seconded to this large group to decide what projects get funded, what investments are made, etc. Non-defense, to be clear, non-defense oriented. It is for the rebuilding and reconstruction of the country. So a couple years went by and they decided that they would probably need a group of business people to provide a private market view on how this is all going to evolve, meaning, the funds are flowing and they were funding the budget. I think the budget was funded for the first 2 years through these funds, but now they're more, as you might know, there's $524 billion required for the reconstruction. That's prospective. That is not what has been contributed today, so it's a lot of money. And so how can these funds be used so that it enables private capital to come into the country, to crowd in private capital versus just public capital? And it's a significant distinction because the money coming into Ukraine right now is not banks, it's not pension funds, it's not hedge funds, it's not what you would describe in the normal financial world as that money. It is taxpayer money globally that's coming in. Excuse me. And so they decided to put a group together of private sector individuals. Each country nominated an individual. As you know, I was very fortunate and honored to be the Canadian rep. And so just like the flavor of the people. So I'm a finance guy. I'm the only one. Interestingly enough, in a world where it's all I see, I'm the only one on this group. The British individual is the chairman of Lloyd's of London. The German fellow is the CEO of Siemens Energy. French is the CEO of Aegis, the large consulting company. There are 4 or 5 countries that are represented by business councils, like the Italian Business Council, the Dutch Business Council, etc. But it's a very, you would argue, eclectic group of high-profile individuals. So, convened a meeting last year in Berlin. Everyone agreed that we're going to be working on these issues to help to advise the donor platform. Now, I could end it there because it didn't get more specific beyond that. So imagine you put 17 of these people, on a Zoom call or something, and like, okay, what issues are we going to discuss? So it evolved that we broke down into like-minded groups. So the few finance people were in a working group. There were 4 working groups. There was one on security, there was one on administration, there was one on finance and insurance, and there was one on social issues. After the course of deliberations, they each came up with a work plan to delve into specific problems. The group I was involved in with Bruce Carnegie-Brown, the British representative, was to look at how do we get private capital to come into Ukraine, but how would a pension fund invest? Knowing what we know, and this is the world we've all grown up in, all I've ever done is to raise money from pension funds and investors, etc. So what is the impediment in Ukraine, or to invest in Ukraine? And in fact, Yuda and I walked around to see some of the pension funds a couple of years ago, as it turns out, all very polite, all willing to listen. You get absolutely top shelf treatment from them, but that's not the kind of risk they take on. Okay, fine. I understand, pensioners' money is pensioners' money, and that's, they won't even commit to invest more in Canada because that's not how the mix goes, and that is not the best risk reward return for a pension fund. So fair. But say this was to happen, at the appropriate time, post abatement of bombarding, for example, and when we can start to rebuild the country. And so we just looked at specific problems. I have a history in the energy business. I've financed energy companies throughout my career. So I said, well, okay, look, what's the most popular thing in the world right now? Wind farms and solar farms. Okay, if you wanted to build a wind farm or a solar farm in Ukraine, how would you do it? Okay, it's not hard. The windmills are available. It's all available. The lands, the wind is fantastic in Ukraine. It's actually one of the, arguably in the world, the best place for wind farms. Unfortunately, it's down in Zaporizhia and places that are tough right now. Dnipropetrovsk has got a great solar area, etc. So we interviewed companies, a few East German companies from East Germany, some Greek developers, Danish developers, Norwegian developers, who all had projects. They've all got stuff lined up, and they all came back with pretty much the same variations on the theme. One is insurance problem, and it's not tough to imagine the insurance issue. Another is currency. You're buying in euros, you're getting paid in hryvnia. Issue. Getting the goods into Ukraine, well, obviously shipping is an issue. And then, the biggest one, and after all those, because those are all, you can kind of solve those along the way. The biggest one is when you're selling wind to whomever. You put up a wind farm, it spins, create electricity, you enter into a contract in the West, here. But it's very normal that you would enter into a 10-year contract with Ontario Hydro or Toronto Hydro, and you're done. And the bank will lend you money for 10 years, and you just boom, boom, boom. You cook, and it's a huge business. It's like building an apartment building. It's very similar. Well, in Ukraine, the issue is there was the long-term contract regime. You can do it with a corporation and sign a contract, and it's financeable. But as related to the central government, that contract basis, in very simple terms, fell apart because of other priorities, which is obvious, right? There's conflicts going on. So there's a requirement to create a long-term pricing regime. The group, I'm getting it. It's really exciting for me, so I'm sorry if it's boring for you, but nonetheless, we came up with a concept of raising a fund, which is it's a very traditional structure that the West might fund and would guarantee the price of electricity. If it fell below a certain price, it would fund it. If it went above, after a cap, you'd pay back. So basically, you can sign a contract for 10 years, put the windmill up, and the banks will lend the money. So that sounds really simple. I described it in about 40 seconds, but that's like a lot of meetings and a lot of interviews. And as we find out, that is a common construct in Moldova, and in other East European countries, or any other countries in Europe. And so now, that is an example. The same happened in insurance, and Mark Markevich was involved in the folks at Fairfax, because what's missing in terms of investing in the country is you want insurance if you're going to put up any hard assets. And what was missing is the reinsurance market has a specific exclusion for what they call RUB, Russia, Ukraine, and Belarus. And so we've been working hard to get the U taken out of that. And so to have a reinsurance, global reinsurance, Aon, Swiss Re, Munich Re, and others to reinsure the risk that, say, a Fairfax is putting on their books. And so that's made a lot of progress.
So, Roman, Business Advisory Council sounds like they work globally with all companies, different companies.
Yeah.
But as a Canadian representative, is part of your job in this group to also look for Canadian companies, talk to Canadian companies, engage them in actually some of these possible businesses, or how to create, for example, this insurance group, which is Fairfax's Canadian company that's involved. Are you, as part of that thing, engaging Canadian companies as well, or more just a global discussion of everybody and then...
Yeah, so on paper, it's the global discussion. They wanted these experts in their various fields to think through the big problems, for the big issues for Ukraine, not specifically be a trade envoy, etc. But gift with purchase, you have someone, that is a Canadian, and I've learned an extraordinary amount over the last year about the issues as it relates to financing, in our context, Canadian companies, and how Canada can support Canadian companies. Mostly, and I'm going to be objective about this, by seeing what other countries are doing. For example, in the case of Denmark, it blows me away. Small country, I don't know, kind of engaged, no big diaspora, I guess, or they're amazing. Like, they're literally underwriting the entire, everything I described, all these little problems, they underwrite the whole thing. And Danish companies are coming into Ukraine, putting up windmills, and they're like, no, it's okay. So the Italians are doing similar. The Germans, they're huge, and they're all ready to go in. And I can objectively say that when situation improves, and it may not be far away, there's going to be all the European countries are going to move in. And so the issue we have is Canadians, A, the geography are not as close. Secondly, there aren't as many Canadian companies with active propositions. I know there are some people doing extraordinarily well, punching way above our weight in that regard, and that needs to be promoted. But to promote it, you just need financing, right? Like, you've got the will, etc. It's just where we're interestingly rough from a Canadian perspective, bad word, but you know what I mean, is the financing and making that capital readily available. And, we've got EDC, which is, export insurance. We've got an organization called FinDev, which currently finances Latin America and Asia, but it doesn't do Ukraine. And so someone somewhere in Ottawa has got to sit down and say, okay, can we get this going? And it's there. The money actually is not hard. And we're not talking big dollars. These projects are 20 million, 80 million, 100 million. And, none of this is, and it's a far better use of shareholder money to fund companies that are creating jobs in Canada, paying taxes, and then off they go, versus just writing checks, right? And
so just to come back to the insurance issue or possibilities. Obviously, you mentioned Denmark is doing very well because they supply some of that risk insurance to the companies going into Ukraine and doing projects, right? There's a Canadian company, Fairfax, that has insurance in Ukraine, and they do supply this kind of risk insurance. We obviously actually had it on this project that I mentioned that was it, but it's very expensive. I mean, we only had limited coverage, so part of it will be covered. But is there a way to take this Danish model of how they support Danish companies going and investing in Ukraine with this kind of insurance, to move it into Canada, maybe again using people like senator to push this thing around the government and see if Canadian government will actually help with ensuring Canadian investments in Ukraine.
Yeah. You know, I don't know if I call it a Danish model versus just the Danish way of doing business. Like, so it's the two. They're doing. You know what I mean? It's that or a Danish attitude. And from what I've learned, and you know, look, I have another job, but you know, spend a lot of time on this. But what I've learned about, say, the Danish and the Italian structure, you know, we have EDC and it's been set up in a certain way. It was set up many, many years ago, and this is the formula. This is what they do. Theirs was set up in a much more what I would call aggressive way, where they really promote, because you know they're more perhaps mercantilist. They're in Europe. They've always had to be abroad. They're just it's easier for them to do that. Canada has been set up, I think, in the model of doing business with Asia, Latin America, and the United States, and the model isn't really filled out for Ukraine. And look, it's something to work on. You know, it just to go back to the mandate of this Business Advisory Council. The other things that I think it's worth talking about is like what are the big issues that have been identified. So, the insurance is one. Power purchase agreements is two. Because those are like fundamental. If that's not fixed, then it doesn't matter how smart you are, nothing's going to get built because capital is not going to come in. Another working group is working on social housing. It's a little harder to define, but they've identified, you know, like people don't have anywhere to live, the workers don't have places to live. You know, how does that get funded? So that's early days in terms of exploration, and I think that's actually worthwhile to look at. Another one is ports, and I think that one's still being debated as to whether that's the business of the Business Advisory Council. And the final one, the Swedish group felt very strongly about putting a guidebook together about how to do business in Ukraine from a European perspective. It's cool, but you know, it's not as fundamental as, you know, how to get capital into Ukraine. And so, just like for clarity, this group is about solving the very big problems through the lens of people who have experience in it. What's missing is the second part of being very organized with large Canadian enterprises. There's small and medium enterprises and then large Canadian, two different languages. It's one's chocolate, one's vanilla. It's different. And so I think the issue with the large Canadian enterprises, and I'll look, a very good example is Cameco, right? Cameco is the world, and they own Westinghouse, and they're the world's biggest, and you know, arguably they are for sure the very best, owned by Brookfield and Cameco. And you know, the people say, well, you know, Canadian banks don't lend to Ukraine, but they lend money to Cameco, and they lent money to Fairfax. And so this money, Canadian bank money, just as an example, is actually making its way to Ukraine through the lens of these companies. And so we just need these companies to feel comfortable to do business in Ukraine. And so you need these big issues solved. Cameco's going to be fine, right? It's unbelievable, but there are others that can do very, very well as well.
But that's only possible for major companies, right? Because small and medium companies don't have that kind of capability to get money from the bank to invest in.
Yeah. Although I would say small and medium companies have more opportunities because there are like niches that they can go, you know, contact. So everything you're doing, like everything the CUCC is doing, you need to turbocharge that. Those contacts can be made. But if you don't have a Rheinmetall or a BAE Systems or Northrop Grumman, although it's American, but Northrop Grumman is setting up in Ukraine, then they're not going to need the suppliers in Ukraine and the workers in Ukraine and the power. Like you need these very large companies to start setting up in the country. And I'm pretty confident they will, but it'll be largely a European country.
Absolutely. Some of the impediments to investing in Ukraine are, you know, Ukraine's bureaucracy, procurement processes, some other regulatory hurdles, and those historically are always brought up. Is the part of the job of BEC also to look at that and suggest some of the solutions to Ukrainian donor platform, or?
Yeah, well, it's not, but it is. I think everybody in that room, it's the elephant in the room that no one talks about, and which is okay. Look, it is what it is. And those are the cards we're dealt. But on the other hand, I think the miracle of private capital, if you want to call it that, is for that money to come in. There's something called know your client, and we don't do business in the West with just anti-money laundering laws. All those things are those loans just don't get made. So if we can have the Ukrainian business world governed by Western norms of lending, then by definition, that money will only go to the right pockets. Like, there will be accidents along the way, but you have to ensure that when it's game on, it is done the way we do it in the West. And I'm not saying Canada, I'm saying the West in general, Europe and other places. And then it's nature. You're either playing the right game and you're going to get the capital, or you're not, and you're just not going to get the capital. And, it's been brought to my attention, and I'm not going to use names of companies, where I said, oh, what about that company? That seems like, they're pretty big. And it's like, that's owned by an oligarch. I'm like, oh, okay. And it's so well known, right? And I'm like, okay, fine. Okay, next. I'm not, right. And and they get bumped out of the process.
And the scale itself of reconstruction of Ukraine after this war is going to be, billions and billions. They're talking about 500 billion, 700 billion, even $1 trillion is being kicked around. So obviously, for a lot of these major projects, the public-private partnership is going to be very, very important in getting involved. Is part of the mandate of EAC also to sort of assist this Ukraine donor platform in that area?
Well, kind of indirectly, right? Because unless you have the ground rules sorted out properly, by what I was saying earlier about having, proper lending standards, proper insurance markets, proper energy markets, nothing's really going to happen. And to be specific, public-private partnerships is like a 1990s phrase. Like right now, you have multilateral funding organizations, international financial institutions like EBRD, IMF, and they do their thing. And their job is to take the risk out. So they're going to be like the equity. Then you're going to need the companies to come in, and they'll have a little bit of risk. And then the pension funds and the hedge funds will be at the very top layer with seemingly very little risk, unless all of that below them collapses. And that's how this is all going to work. Right now, there's the top two layers of the cake don't exist. It's just the IMF and EBRD layer, and then private money. People putting equity into it. So we need to, and look, it's happening. The most impressive part of this entire experience is the quality of the Ukrainians, like crazy good. Like really smart people, very thoughtful, have thought about all the angles, but sometimes they don't feel empowered, and they need, and look, part of the role of the Business Advisory Council is to say, it's going to be okay. You got cheap businessmen, that's what they need. They need the West to sort of say, this is better. For example, this PPA exercise I was describing. At the same time, there is a group called the Europe-Ukraine Energy Association, and there's yet a third group, Ukrainian Wind Association. They all had the same idea. And God bless them, the Norwegian guy met them, and he said, hey, we're working with the Norwegians on this, and they're very, very good. And so they all met, and they're like, well, wait a second. So we all agreed this is the right way to go about. So now everybody blessed the structure. And so when we had a meeting just the other day, we presented it, Deputy Minister Sobolov was like, this is exactly what we need. We need this group to say this is the right way to go. And then, okay, done. The West has told us this is right. They need the same thing on insurance. And so what they are asking for, the other things they need less help on, and so it's iterative process. You also, as like volunteers, don't want to waste time that this is not useful for the country. And so, like I said, they're very impressive, the people that we've met in the Ministry of Finance primarily, and, other ministries. They're very, very good.
Yeah. as we heard today during the discussion from Senator and from Catherine, this urgency on the funds and possibility of arresting them by countries and taking care of that by countries. And it sounds to me like the urgency is sort of end of June, early July. Does your organization also get involved in that? Was that discussed at all? Or that's not a priority? And maybe your own thoughts outside of the BEC on this topic.
Yeah, we're into my own thoughts territory here. The BAC, you know, their role, just to go back to it, is to advise the individuals on the Ukraine donor platform as to, you know, issues relating to the employment of funds that they are putting towards Ukraine. That's really like it's meant to be narrow, but there's creep, and because I'm Canadian and I'm actually the only one of Ukrainian descent on this entire thing, I care a little more, and so get involved in other things, right? But I think it's probably slowed down now, just because of these negotiations with whomever, the Americans, Donald Trump, you pick. No one knows where this all goes, because they're now and that needs to be solved. On the one hand, it's quite positive if it can be put to rest, and this is just the way it's going to be, and you know that has its political benefits as well. Then things will progress. If it isn't, then like the good news and the bad news is the whole world is watching this right now, every single day. So no hiding. Everyone's going to be an expert on it. Every pension fund. I'll tell you, every pension fund in Canada, they've got people that know just as much about this as you and I. They just don't have the familial background, but they're very, intelligent and know a lot about it. People at Brookfield and places like that, they know all about it.
Super. You mentioned Americans, and I was just wondering, obviously the American person that's on the BEC.
They get 3.
Oh, they get 3.
Yeah.
Okay. They must have been still put in under Biden.
Yeah.
And how has their mood changed in the discussions from Biden times till now? Are they talking different? Are they changing their mind, or is it still the same?
Yeah, it's changed. I would say, our 1-year anniversary is coming up, and the countries can renominate the people. So I was fortunate to be renominated by the Canadians, and I asked the guy, the Norwegian guy, and I'm close to, and I'm like, hey, what about the Americans? And he's like, I don't know what the Americans. So we don't know. The 3 Americans on the committee now, one is the head of McDonald's International, the food, the restaurant. The other is Phil from Northrop Grumman, and the third is in the logistics business. He's into ports. But for sure, they were nominated by Biden. So I don't know. Honestly, I'll find out in a week or 2 whether it's a new cast of characters. I'm a little worried that they say no to no one. That's kind of a worse scenario. And the other thing that's quite fascinating too, and I don't have direct exposure to it. I have an associate that works with me. She's like the Sherpa, they call her. She does like all the background meetings and whatnot. And the Sherpa dynamic is apparently quite a show, and they all, get on Zoom. They're all, positioning and posturing. And the Americans always said, James Sullivan's State Department, right? And he acted like James Sullivan's State Department. And, he listens to everything and says, but this is the way it's going to be. Well, wouldn't you know now that in these meetings, hey, James, what do you think? He's, I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Like, he's like tail between their legs. Like, it's an amazing dynamic. It's terrible. It's terrible what's happened, because these are really capable, smart people, but it's like you can just see it in the people. And the other thing, the Germans are the chair because they were the presidents of the G7, 2 years ago, and so Christian Bruch is the chair. And when they were going through their election, they were very nervous. But then Merz has been elected, and now they've got this whole head of steam. Like they're as pumped up as ever, right? So it's a fascinating dynamic to see through the eyes of business people how, the politics behind it. So I'm okay either way, but nonetheless, political.
Super, thank you. Why don't we open, because I had a lot of questions, why don't we open for maybe 3-4 questions. So we have time with Taras. Taras, we still got some time? Okay, so we had Roman, Paul, and Delesha. And number 4. Okay, number 5. 5 questions. Okay, Roman, shoot.
Yeah, question, Roman, thank you for this information. I wonder, historically, Canadian financial system was very hesitant when it comes to the defense, sector, especially when you take NBC that you mentioned, Brookfield, or anyone else.
Yeah.
NBC won't even insure contracts that the Canadian government is issuing. They won't support because it's defense. While in China and in Russia, on a governmental level, they will support it, in private companies, they will take it, they will follow them. I wonder, what's your opinion on the need to evaluate this approach where we're not back in the 80s or 70s? Time was different, so I wonder what's your opinion?
No, thank you for that, because I actually did, they came to me, and I asked our risk management people at the bank, we're, Canadian bank, low risk, and I asked him about that, and he says, no, there's no specific thing about it. We have to look at it on its merits of who the contract's with. So I think if you're contracted with, say, the Canadian government, so then it's maybe okay. You know what I mean? It's, well, I don't know, but it's worth the fight now. It's worth it, because I think now the world has changed on these things, right? There's moral. Anyways, we should talk about this, because I actually did reach out to our head of risk on that, and he didn't shut it down, but we'll see. Nothing like a test. Yeah.
Paul, please.
Just a question regarding the upcoming Group Party Conference.
Yeah.
First of all, Roman, congratulations on being reappointed, and Zenon, love your socks.
Thank you.
So the upcoming Trade Recovery Conference is going to be in July in Rome.
Yeah.
So question, Roman, for you and question presented. Roman, what can you tell us about that upcoming conference? And what do you think we can be doing to prepare for that conference as Canada to become more active? So I was at the last one in Berlin, and quite frankly, Canada was not really relevant, right? And I think we should be preparing that platform and making sure that Canadian business actively participates. Last year, there was 3,000 delegates, business, NGOs, government. So that's the first part of my question. Second part of my question, Zenon, to you, is have you started planning the Trade Recovery Conference that's happening in Rome in July of this year? Because I think that CUCC will certainly play a major role and also help promote other CUCC-like organizations around the world. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thanks, Pavel. The competition is fierce, and so I'm going into Rome in July. But for example, there was a conference a month ago, I think, Zenko, we talked about it, on March 5th in Milan. It's like kind of very bureaucratic to me, but a preparation conference for the upcoming conference. 1,700 attendees, 850 Italians. Basically, they just wanted Italians, as Cem listed, they actually said, maybe you have some companies and that's right. So we set to the usual, the Fairfaxes, etc. So it's competitive because now, so they're all going to jam in. And so I would say we invite all the we need to make sure all the Canadian companies that have an interest in it get invited and hopefully attend. And what is missing is a database. Once again, this is not part of my back work. This is just an observation. As an engaged participant, we need a database of companies in that regard. We also probably need a high-profile person or two from the Canadian government, I would argue, to get media, because we need the media. And we all think we're important, but you need a high-profile person to do that. And so that's really it. It's unfortunate that we don't have, if you just look at the structure of Canada, we don't have a Siemens Energy, we don't have a Rheinmetall, we don't have these large industrial, North America doesn't actually. America's got McDonald's. They don't really have that many participants. They got these niche companies, like logistics companies and defense companies, because North America's already evolved technologically. You know, what is interesting is that on this committee, the Korean representative is the CEO of POSCO, world's largest shipping container company. That's interesting. That's really relevant. The Japanese fellows from Kawasaki Heavy Industries, the head of Europe. Okay, that's interesting. So, but, you know, can you name other than Cameco? You know, we've got Alcan. The big Alcan is not a Canadian company. That's owned by the Belgians, you know what I mean? Or the French, rather. You know, like these are not, when we used to have Inco and Stelco and all, they're not Canadian companies anymore. I'm not saying that, I'm not judging, it just is the case. Sorry? Critical minerals, that's true.
What about the sort of the Myanmar's of the world? Yeah. No, the Myanmar, big oil parts.
Yeah, I know, but you know, you're dealing with companies facing death right now, right? So, you know, it's not, and actually, just thinking through the industrial structure of Ukraine, I'm not sure it's auto parts. Auto parts is the first thing you'd be doing there. Slovakia's got an amazing, you can drive through Slovakia and it's all an auto part, it's all autos, right? So, you know, that might not be your priority. It would be probably other forms. So I'm not, it's, but you know, like we have to do best with what we have. I think technology, critical mining is really the space, and probably a couple of the oil companies, but because of what's happened with the structure of the oil industry in Canada, they're very Canadian, right? So, but to answer your question, let's try to get as prominent a politician as we can out there and start, you know, banging the drum. I think, and I've also noted that with all the machinations, ebbs and flows, be more polite, what's going on in Ottawa politically, it's slowed down because there's no boss, so to speak. It just is, you know, that it's like in any office environment, there's no boss. You know, when Christia moved from her role, then the urgency of it all kind of slowed down. And to think of it, they've had 3 ministers of finance in 3 months, I think, 4 months. And I learned this through the people I deal with. Every time the minister resigns, they are out of a job. They have to get rehired by the new minister. So this isn't making me feel good as a taxpayer, by the way, but it just is the way Ottawa works. So.
Thank you, Roman. If you're wondering about my socks, because you cannot see it, and I got compliments twice now, I'll tell you what it says. It says FCKPTN. You can figure out what it means.
CUCC for.
I think
Yes. So CUCC has been involved last year on a sort of little scale. We participated and we met with companies and we had few representatives. This year we actually talked with Roman and we exchanged few emails with what's the lady's again, Jocelyn. Yeah, she was also participating in our CUCC conference, and she is and you suggested some companies that could be possible, you know, the Acons and Chemical and some of the bigger ones. But I agree, some of the oil companies maybe could be added, and some critical minerals guys. So we're working with GAC and we're working with.
Yeah, defense. Yeah, no. I think one thing I should point out that is a benefit of this structure of the Business Advisory Council is that they proactively chose someone. They have ownership of it, and they want to succeed. They're politicians. They want to look good. So they're always like, "Oh, what can we do?" So we actually know the names of the 4 or 5 people in Ottawa who are responsible for making the minister look good. That's a very important, that's like the most important thing to success, is to know how all this stuff works. And now, like, I have some visibility on that. So that's probably the biggest benefit.
Yes, thank you. Lesha, please. Lesha. Oh, microphone, please.
Microphone's a minute.
Hear me? Oh, yes. Okay. Yeah, my name came first. Okay. Ravana, you mentioned you were the only one on the VAC of Ukrainian descent. I'm curious, but perhaps others are as well. anything you would comment on your sentiment and kind of your approach versus the other members who are not of Ukrainian descent? Just curious. The other thing I would just comment on as well is anything else we can do to support your role on the BAC moving forward. You mentioned there's 4 or 5 people that are active in that regard, so curious about how we can support you in your role, and anything else we can do in the upcoming G7 meetings as it relates to that, which seems to be very timely and important.
Okay, Jackie. Yes, thank you for that first question. Because I thought I would be, but I'm not. Like, they're all super passionate. Like, it kind of blew me away emotionally as well. Like, wow, this like Norwegian guy is just is as passionate about what's going on in Ukraine as I am. Like, I have a different type of passion probably. He's got more of like the coming for me next passion. But, you know, nonetheless, all the people there were very engaged. The German people are very engaged. They spend an extraordinary amount of time on this project, like just an extraordinary amount of time. So I feel it's actually a good thing. I feel good that there's support around the world. And because it's not just what you see on CNN. When you actually deal with and have conversations with these people, they know these cities, they know where all the damage is, they know like it's really, and the detailed knowledge is really impressive. So yeah, that's a kind of a cool observation that I have. On the help, so like it's only been a year, it's actually less, 9 months. And as I kind of described, it's a bit of a voyage of discovery. The first few months, like what are we doing here and who's doing what and all that sort of thing. Now we have a bit of a cadence. We kind of know what the government wants. Like, you know, the minister said, this is what I need. I need the imprimatur of the Western business community to say this is normal business practice so that we don't have to guess anymore, right? And so it's not going to be a lot of things, but it's some things that can primarily finance. Find how to get money into the country on non-difficult terms, like, you know, market rates versus risky rates. So now there's a secretariat, there's a group of people that they've now staffed up, and they're going to put together marketing materials and a website and other resources to kind of create an orbit around the business advisory, kind of what the business advisory, kind of what the chief goal, the objective is. And I think it's maybe a little subliminal, but to show that there's a very Western feel to Ukraine, meaning it's not just like an East European country, which it isn't by any stretch. It's insulting even talk about it, but for a Western country that doesn't know, but like, put it this way, a pension fund in downtown Toronto or downtown Montreal, like, ooh, Ukraine's risky, you know, bomb. It's like, no, have a look. Like, this is all good. Like, your investment, you will earn an above market rate of return. You know, they solve for 7 to 9% a year. You'll probably make 9 to 12% a year at the same level of risk because you have, you know, these global, like the IMFs or World Banks or below you, they'll take the risk for you. And so you need to have that money start to flow. And once they get the feel of that kind of return, it's actually going to be quite impressive. You know, there's a bit of time between now and then, but I think once those materials together, we need to leverage this message and get it out. Versus specific opportunities is to talk about this safety, for lack of better, or the stability of the business community there, the ability to do business, the ability to get your money out. Like, all these things have to be true, by the way, like to get money out. And right now it's not so easy. Well, it's impossible, but let's assume it gets better, that all this becomes more normalized. But it's going to be a bit of a journey. But like I said, from everything I've observed, there's no showstoppers here. And your point on the corruption that is everyone's boogeyman, it's like, I don't even think about it. Honestly, I don't even think about it. It does not factor into any of our conversation because none of this happens unless the money flows on normal Western terms, being, the anti-money laundering laws that we all have, the know your client laws and all that stuff.
And I mean, we're just going right now through trying to take some dividends out of Ukraine. It was never very simple, but during the war it became impossible. 2024 has opened now for dividends to go out, but still a lot of bureaucracy, national bank involved, and everybody else, and so it is tough, but it's possible. I mean, it's possible to get dividends out now in 2020, starting in 2024. So it's going to be, I think, easier in 25 and going forward. So it's positive. Yes, please.
Yes.
Catherine,
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah. Okay, as somebody who has been part of the three multinational companies opening their business in Ukraine between 1991 1997, Procter & Gamble, Master Foods, and Philip Morris, when these companies were coming to the Ukrainian market. And as somebody who has been a CIBC employee in the past, small business, and also in the National Bank of Canada, my question and suggestion is, number one, how could you identify the companies, the biggest companies that might be interested in doing business in Ukraine amongst the clients of CIBC and maybe other banks, so that we can help them with the information and help them to be more aggressive? Because the American companies, the multinationals were very aggressive, and they are not shy to go into new markets and develop them. But Canadians have always been shy to do it. Now is the time, I think, because Canada, let's say, maybe will be losing some part of the US market, so there is an opportunity for Canada to be more aggressive and go to Ukraine. And also, if there is any way of having an interbank group or committee between the 6 major banks of Canada, or 7 major banks of Canada, so that we could have a joint effort on the Ukraine project, meaning that these banks will be somehow working together to identify their respective clients which would be interested in doing business in Ukraine, and maybe we can help them with the information and marketing to do that. I was trying to do it with the RPC on my own, but there was not much interest. Maybe I'm not at that level, which you are at, and they maybe listen to you better.
Let Roman answer the question. Thank you.
yeah, my wife, by the way, was a Procter & Gamble in the early 90s, and was trying to do business with Ukraine, so I don't think that's much. But I think they're sick of hearing about Ukraine and CIBC through me, but nonetheless, all good. But it's like, and you may not know this, by the current CEO who's retiring, Victor Dodic, is Croatian, and he's a champion. Like, it's been fantastic. I'm going to miss him, but I think he was going to be very actively involved in other stuff after. To answer your question specifically, it's there's nothing like profit that drives ambition. And once other companies see Canadian companies or American companies, doesn't matter, another company making money in Ukraine, they don't need to convince anybody. They're going to be like, oh, I want some of that. Like, it's like Vietnam. Vietnam War ended, and it's like, oh my God, Vietnam. Then, guess what? All of a sudden, these auto parts companies start to set up in Vietnam. Now everybody's in Vietnam. Like, it all flows in. Like, I honestly can't tell you whether we lend money in Vietnam, but it doesn't matter, because if Magna or Linamar wanted to set up in Vietnam, we would lend money in Magna or Linamar, because they're going to pay us back. It's not Vietnam. And so you need to get the Canadian companies for them to sort of see that it's okay to invest in Ukraine, right? Like, that's part of and the aforementioned issues we had with the lack of Canadian companies that are particularly well suited to an emerging growth market. There aren't that many where the Canadian industrial landscape is set up for a mature market. So telecom is one, I think that sort of thing, but we see the French telecom companies are already in Ukraine, right? So the Europeans are a step ahead as it relates to these things, but one industry that Canada is exceptionally good at is engineering and construction. And you see that. You see Aecon has already got a project there, and they're up at these like WSP, Atkins Borealis. They're all very, very, very good. Stantec, there's like six or seven of them. That's an opportunity for them. But see, with them, they don't need a lot of money, right? Because they're consulting. They need an office, they got to pay rent, and then their consultants go in, they'll make a lot of money, which is all good. It's all good. Canadian kids graduate, they can go work as engineers. That's what we need to encourage, is that ambition to want to go do business there. But that's kind of what we have. We have entrepreneurs. The thing is, in 5 to 10 years, there will be businesses that currently don't even exist in Canada that will be doing this. They haven't had an opportunity to exist. And I think the diaspora here is a great draw, but it won't necessarily be the diaspora that does it. I think just good old-fashioned, someone in Guelph has a great idea and they're just I'm going to make some money. Agriculture is another area that we need to talk about, because a lot of really small companies, like 3 huge companies, and like Nutrien and Mosaic and others that do business, so they'll be there as soon as it feels safe, that sort of thing.
Super, thank you very much. And Catherine, last question, because we have to go and taste at least some wine.
So,
No, not Croatia.
so 2 questions. The first is really concerned about Canada not being on the ground and missing out on this rebuild and reconstruction. So we've seen Germans, Italians, French, but they're envoys on the ground. And I would say it's not on our government radar screen, and it's not on the radar screen of business in Canada. So really, what are your ideas of how do we, it's unreal to think that with our ties between Canada and Ukraine and mining, agriculture, construction, there's so many, at a time when we need to diversify our economy, and we're absolutely terrified that nobody is speaking about this. So would love to hear about that. And the second question is around, does anybody speak about the 1,000 companies that are still operating in Russia? Does that ever come up in any of these discussions with the Business Advisory Council, including Procter & Gamble, Bacardi, my whole industry, my spirits industry, they're all in Russia still.
Thanks. On your second question, no, it's not a political forum, and everyone's it's not that venue for that. On your first one, to be simplistic about it, it's money. Capitalists get excited by money. So to my example about the Danes, so the reason, it's someone doesn't wake up in Denmark one day and says, I'm going to do business in Ukraine, and say, no, I have basically free money from the government to set up a coffee roaster in Kiev. I'm going to do it because the Danish government has basically given me free money to do it. Now, 50-50 odds it'll work out, and it's perfect. That's the odds that the Danish government needs, that they don't need 100%. 50 is a win for them. And so it's basically funding. So what you just need is the will, in our case in Ottawa, to say, yeah, we're going to take a hit. And I think it's this FinDev vehicle myself, because in the States, they have this, up until recently, a force of good called the DFC, which basically literally writes checks. And when I first heard about it, I asked them I thought I misheard how this thing works. And it's basically the CIA paying companies to set up in these countries. Maybe not the CIA, but it feels like the CIA. They're just writing checks. Here, go set up a logistics business in maybe this part of Eastern Ukraine. Would that be okay? And they go and set it up. It's right now, apparently they're on the other side of these negotiations, but whatever. So FinDev is actually constructed to be that So in the world of finance, there's like something called concessionary capital, meaning it'd be great if we got it back, but it's concessionary, right? And so that's what that is. And we really need to lead into that. That is like, it's not more complicated than that. And look, I think there would be, if that was to happen tomorrow, the day after, you would have, I don't want to use these company names in public, some people that are involved. No, they'll, boom, done. This plant will be built and that'll happen. They're just waiting for those funds to flow. And like I said earlier, we're in election mode and it's hell. But that's all it is.
Super. Thank you very much, Roman, for all the insights about the Business Advisory Council and a few other additional tips. And again, thank you very much.